Hey Casper fans, this is a new video series on the new opening response to one e4, which I'm calling the C5-Alekhines, otherwise known as the names of which variation of the Sicilian defense. But I don't intend to play the normal lines of the Sicilian defense that everyone plays. I just want to confuse my opponents. With knight f6, I'm attacking the e4 pawn, which I expect my opponent is going to save by playing e5. Pushing my knight to d5. This is the main area of my mate, just like in the Alekhines defense. If bishop c4, I attack this undefended bishop one more time with knight b6. And if bishop b3, I'll just win the bishop. I guess my opponent won't do this, but anyways, the whole idea is to try and checkmate my opponent very fast after this sequence of moves, d4 and pawn to b5. My weird gambit. If bishop takes b5, I'll just go queen a5 check to try and win that poor bishop like this. Hopefully this will happen, but I don't know. So this is what I'm going to play against any random chess player on Lichess, and I ask you guys to stay tuned, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because that's what encourages me to keep on making more wonderful videos just like this one. This is very tiresome and we see a lot of content creators quitting YouTube chess, but I'm here doing what I love for you guys in the hope that you would learn one or two things and improve your chess. That's why you have all the reasons to subscribe to this channel. Don't just watch. If you are already a subscriber, you can simply share this video, hit the like button, or share your thoughts in the comment section down below so that we can beat the algorithm together. Anyway, there are some instances where white doesn't play pawn to e5. Sometimes they play d3 or knight c3 just to try and avoid any unknown theories and traps. But even if this happens, I'll try to invite them to go pawn to e5 still. So I'll go pawn to e6 just like I advised in my tutorial video, so that after e5, I might go knight d5 still. This trade is only good for black. If pawn to d4, the top played move, I'll just take. In fact, this is what I advised to do in my first tutorial video, so that after knight takes d4, you go knight c6, challenging that knight. If knight db5, by the way, intending to do this, just go pawn to d6. And should they play bishop f4, there are two good moves in this position. If you don't like playing pawn to e5, which is my favorite, you can play knight e5. This is also playable, but if you're not a fan of these lines where you exchange queens, don't go knight e5. Just play pawn to e5, going back to your e4, e5 stuff, all the way from the normal Sicilian defense. If bishop g5, you first of all want to get rid of your opponent's pieces out of your territory, which I have highlighted. By the way, I should mention to say bishop e7 is not a good move in this particular position when your opponent's knight is inside your territory, in your yard. So if there's only one thing to avoid in the Sicilian defense, is white's knight sitting on b5. You don't need to entertain any of white's knights in the Sicilian defense. Don't allow the knight to sit on b5. So that's why you don't want to play bishop e7 first before playing s6. If you just go ahead and play bishop e7, this will be bad for your eyeballs after bishop takes, g takes, and knight d5. Look what I'm talking about. This is still playable, but not the best. So you first of all want to get rid of any knight on b5 before playing bishop e7, or before you continue doing whatever you want to do. And now this is when you go b5, trying to go b4, or simply bishop e6, you know, stopping knight d5. If knight d5 anyways, because what else can they do? You can simply take. That's the simplest. Or guess what? You can even play bishop e7 and castle short in this position, or go queen a5 check, even better. Because if they block with c3, guess what? Now you go knight takes e4 and all of a sudden the knight is hanging and also the bishop is hanging. If they play a more matured move, bishop d2, I'll just play queen c5 or queen d8 and threaten to take on e4 or the knight. Again, if bishop g5, by the way, I can force a draw if I want. I'll just play something else. Say bishop takes d5. If pawn takes, I go queen a5 check again, and whatever black does, say pawn to c3 this time, I win back the pawn and exchange queens, or I go knight e7 if I don't want to exchange queens. Again, this trade is okay. In the Sicilian defense, your king is the safest piece on earth. White won't be able to castle short, otherwise you will start attacking them using that open g file, and they can hardly castle long because the queen side is open already. So taking with the G pawn is fine, completely fine, especially if you didn't like the idea of exchanging queens on d5. If bishop c4, you have this and this, it'll be bad. If pawn to b4, you have queen takes a3. So how can white protect their d5 pawn? Maybe by playing knight c4, but again, if you don't want to exchange queens, or maybe due to knight takes d6, you just go queen c5 or queen c7 depending on what you want. If b4, you can even play queen c7. This is a weakness. I'm just showing you some of the moves that I will play depending on what my opponent is going to do. Lastly, white may play the closed Sicilian, intending to go into the Grand Prix attack. And what I advise to do against this is to simply go a6, play the lazy Sicilian, even against the closed variation, because after pawn to a4, you can go b5 if you want, stopping bishop c4 for good, or simply go pawn to e6. In the Grand Prix attack, you always want to rush with e6 and pawn to d5. That's the secret. If knight f3, you can go b5 if you want, start expanding on the queen side, whatever you want to do. I don't see the point of playing knight c6. I think this is somehow slow in my opinion. Here I would play pawn to d5 and threaten to go d4 next. Oh, just knight f6, so that if pawn to e5, I play my Alekhine's move and go into this line. I love this. Once again, if my opponent doesn't play e5 and let's say they play pawn to d3, just an example, I'll still go d5, so that after e5, I transpose back to the French defense without them knowing, because next, after knight c6, castle short, might go bishop e7 and castle short myself. They might play f5 here trying to disturb my plan, but here I can just take, knight d e5, if pawn takes, I take back with my bishop. Or if they don't do that, I can still figure it out. If anything, I can just take the f5 pawn and forget about everything, castle short. So let's see what my opponent is going to play against my c5 Alekhines and hope things will go right. And here is an exciting news before I proceed. Regardless of who you are, if you have an online business or even a tech solution, you can actually sponsor my videos so that I can help you boost your brand. Even if you're just a freelancer or a software developer, the link is in the comment section down below. Right, let's continue. So here we have a game. I'm playing against a 21-26 rated opponent. And there we see the closed Sicilian defense. I wanted to play my Alekhine style. So what did I advise to do against knight c3, the closed Sicilian defense? Well, it turns out you can still play the lazy Sicilian beginning with s6. And your idea is just to go pawn to b5, expand on this side of the board. And if need be, you might transpose back to the Alekhines after pawn to e6, knight d5. So let's do that. Oh, by the way, whenever you see the move, whenever you see the move knight c3, you should always think of the Grand Prix attack. Your opponent probably wants to play the Grand Prix attack. So next, I hope to see this move bishop c4. By the way, which is why I played a6 to stop bishop b5 or bishop c4. If bishop c4, I'm just going to play b5 anyways. So in this position, what you want to do is to play e6 and pawn to d5. That's what I advised in my tutorial video. So let's begin with e6. So now I can go back to my Alekhine's defense with the move knight f6, attacking nothing. With knight f6, I just want to go pawn to d5. Yes, so this is our ideal plan now, to go knight d5. We want to allow this trade to happen. Excuse me, knight takes, pawn takes. So that next we might play d6. After pawn to d4, I said just go knight c6, putting more pressure on the d4 pawn. What am I doing today with my arrows? Okay. Pawn to c3. Did I cover this move? Anyway, let me just wait for my opponent to take, because I have bishop takes c5. So let me just play d6. So this becomes very easy to play, you guys. The whole idea is to start with the Sicilian defense, and then transpose to the Alechine's defense lines. So here I can take on e5, I guess. Oh, wait a second. Why can't I start with c takes d4 first and then take on e5 later? Just to oversimplify the game, you know? Yep, they have always been taught to take towards the center of the board. That's the only thing they know. So check bishop d2. I have knight takes b4, so I don't have to worry about bishop takes. I can just develop my bishop and then cast a shot in the near future. So this is how you play even in real OTB games, serious games. Yeah, I was waiting for this move, by the way, because now I can just go ahead and take... Oh, wait a second. My bishop is still hanging. So first, let me sort out this problem. And then I'll take the knight. And take the free pawn. So let me just remove that. Yep. Or maybe I should have started with queen b6. So look how I managed to mess up my opponent's pawn structure. I think this is a blunder due to queen b6, just like I mentioned. Bishop takes h7 was just too early. My opponent wanted me to take the bishop so that they could take the knight, but forgetting I had an in-between move, queen b6. So now I can safely take. Oh. Yep, if rook a d1, I'll just give a check. Let me activate my rook anyways. So the idea is to play... Oh, okay. That's a clever move. But I can still go. Is this a mate? Check. And this. How is my opponent going to stop this? Wow. So that was just a tricky line, you guys. Mate. In fact, I would have taken on h2 with mate. That was going to be more fun. Before I proceed, this video is sponsored by all of our paid members on Patreon. These are the guys who support Casper Chess financially. In return, we give them extra study materials and other premium content on Patreon to thank them in style. Not to mention that all of our patrons are at liberty to make video requests and ask any chess related questions. You can join free membership and pay later if you want through the link in the comment section down below. Now, let's continue. This was awesome, you guys. Let me just see where my opponent went wrong. This is how you play against a closed Sicilian using my lazy Sicilian ideas. You start with a6. You see, just like I said, whenever you see knight c3, always think of the Vienna gambit where white plays f4 later on, or simply the Grand Prix attack. You see, the problem with knight c6 in this position is that after something like pawn to f4 and say d6, white usually plays the move bishop b5 to try and get rid of your queen's knight first, and then they play pawn to d3, develop their knight in castle shot. If white manages to attain this position, your chances of survival are too minimal, and that's why you don't want to play into what they know. That's why I decided to come up with this strategy where you start with a6 first, so that white no longer has bishop b5 in the near future. After pawn to f4, you always want to play e6. Yes, you can go pawn to b5, that's not much of a stretch, but e6 is more logical as your plan is very clear. You just want to play d5 next, and that's what I did. Oh, wait a second, I didn't play d5 immediately, but I could have played d5 if I wanted, even pawn to b5. For example, d5, pawn takes, and next threatening to go d4. If they play d4 themselves, don't worry about taking. In these kinds of situations, this is no longer the normal Sicilian defense where you need to take on d4. You just have to go knight c6, waiting for white to take, so that you take back with your bishop. Oh, there's queen takes d5. Wow, that's adorable. Nope, but you have queen e7. Check. No need to trade off queens. Say bishop e2, because what else can they do? Now you go knight f6. You're just way ahead in development. Say queen d1, castle short. White can't even castle short. You have bishop g4 coming, rook a d8, and more open lines. At times, after d takes c5, you don't even have to give up your d5 pawn. You can go d4 first if you have to, but be prepared of queen e2 check, after which you go bishop e7. The knight is still under attack. They are going to play something like knight e4, I guess. And this is where you play knight f6, allowing this trade to happen. Or just put your king on f8. This is safe, very safe indeed. If queen d3, by the way, you have bishop f5 pinning that piece. They might play bishop d2, I guess, trying to castle long. But once again, you have bishop f5. You want to get rid of that and win back your pawn. If they castle long, you don't even have to take immediately. You have a better move, queen d5, wanting to take. They don't have queen c4 due to queen takes. By the way, the e4 knight is under attack, so if they play knight g3, that's when you can take on a2. Bishop e1, your last squad bishop is under attack, so you go bishop d7, it's safer. Knight takes d4, queen a1 check, king d2, queen takes b2, knight takes c6. Just look at how beautiful your position looks even though your king is on f8. And look at the eval bar. Stockfish thinks black is winning. How do you develop your king's rook? Simple, h5, h4, or just h5 and then rook lift. You're back into the game. Knight f6 is also waiting. So this is how the game was going to go if I played the immediate pawn to d5 probably, but I just decided to play knight f6 in this position instead of playing d5. And the other purpose of playing knight f6 was to allow this e5 move, because I just love this knight maneuver, which we also see in the Alekhine's defense, that after knight takes, I have these two pawns, and they always play pawn to d4. For God's sake, you don't always have to take on d4. This is no longer the normal Sicilian defense, you guys. That's one thing you need to understand. So instead of taking, this is where you can go d6 or knight c6, what I did, so that if they take, you take back with tempo. And by the way, just in case you were wondering, after pawn takes and bishop takes, looks like white was going to win a free pawn for sure, but there are some tactics here that you can play with. For example, queen a5 check is such a tricky move. If queen d2, you just retreat your queen back to b6 and pressurize the f2 square. But if they protect with their bishop, you even have a nasty discovery after bishop check, and you're going to win the queen. So this is one trick that you can play after queen takes d5. There are no free pawns in this line. Again, pawn to d6 is a move you might want to consider after queen takes d5, because if pawn takes, once again you have queen a5 check. Again, if bishop d2 or pawn to c3, you have bishop f2 check, discovery, and win the queen. If queen d2 this time, you simply go queen b6. What else can you do? And it looks like you are doing nothing. But hey, remember that white can't castle short even if they develop their last squad bishop, but you can. And if queen e2 check, buying time, again, you can play king f8 just like we saw in the previous line, or putting your king on d8. For example, I would play this knowing that I'm just one move away from pinning white's queen to the king. Maybe knight e5 may help, but I don't see any future after bishop e6. Besides, I can take this pawn whenever I want to. So let's just say bishop d2, because they intend to castle long. But hey, that's why we put our queen on b6, to keep an eye on the b2 pawn, also attacking the rook. If knight takes check, you take back with your pawn. They have to save their rook somehow, or by defending it this way. But you have queen b6, no need to trade off your powerful queen. I mean, exchanging it with your opponent's less active queen. That's not what you want to do in chess. Queen g5 check may be tricky, but you have king c8 and there are no more checks, at least for now. Say this, you have rook e8 in this position, one move away from discovery check. Say bishop e2, bishop d4, and black is just in trouble.